Welcome, everybody, to Educator Nation podcast from Educator Circle with Dr. Lisa. So glad to have everybody today with us in the podcast. As you know, Educator Circle is a professional development opportunity, both live and online, for educators all over the world. And I am a John Maxwell certified team member and motivational speaker, and have worked with so many different organizations. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome. You can find out more about us by following us on all the social media. But today we have a very special guest with us today. We have Fran Capo from New York City. She's the Guinness Book of World Records fastest talker in the world. She's a comedian, a motivational speaker, and author. And she has so much to say to educators. She's been a longtime friend of mine, and at one point came to do a motivational talk for my teachers many years ago when I was a superintendent in Cincinnati, and we have never forgotten her and stayed in touch with all the exciting things she's done over the years. And now I'm working with educators globally, and so is Fran. So we are going to be doing a project together. We're going to tell you about that at the end of the call. But for right now, Fran, tell us a little bit about the world fastest talker, Guinness Book of World Records, and how exciting that was, and what you're doing these days.
Well, first of all, thank you for that wonderful intro. And I'll be talking slow. Otherwise, of course, the podcast will be over in like a minute. So we'll keep it at the regular pace right now. But if you're telling you about the fast talking, I think we should start with how I broke the record. And the way that I broke the record was I was working at a radio station, WBLS-FM in New York City, and I was writing comedy for them. And kidding around one day, I said, you know what? I could do this really cool impression of, but I call it Junie, Mae West's long-lost sister. And so the DJ at the time flings the weather and traffic copy at me. And in radio, when the red tally light comes on, you have to start speaking. So he flings the copy at me, and all of a sudden I, have the weather and traffic in front of me. So I'm like, oh, I think the weather and traffic is. And in the 30 seconds I happened to do it, a lady from the Daily News was listening. And she said, oh my gosh, I'm doing a story on weather and traffic, people. How long have you been doing it? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell her 30 seconds. So I was like, oh, I've been doing it a while. And she said, oh, well, what are you planning on doing next? And I didn't have the next, but I had the lady there, from the Daily News. So I said, I'm thinking of breaking a world's record. And she's like, for what? And I was like, oh, I can't tell you because it'll jinx it. And she said, well, listen, if you decide to let me know, she said, the article is going to go in at 6 o'clock today. Give me a call. So I literally went out, bought a Guinness book, started looking through it, like, what can I do, pogo sticking, whatever. And I saw fast talking. So it was 5 to 6. I'm about to go on stage. I call the lady up, like, all right, listen, I'll tell you, I'm thinking of breaking the record as the world's, fastest talker. She said, what's the record at? I'm literally standing in a phone booth, and I look at, and and I'm looking at the record, and I'm going, well, the record's at 552 words a minute. And she said, what are you at? I went, 550. I said, those last 2 words are a killer. So she prints it in the paper, and the very next day, the Larry King Live people call me up and ask me to go on the show and break the record. Now, here's another thing. At that point in time, I didn't even know who Larry King was. All I heard was cable, and I'm like, whoa, is this some kind of porn? They're like, oh, honey, no, it's a national show. I said, what if I don't break the record? They said, Larry doesn't care whether you break the record or not. He just cares that you try it on his show first. So I figured, okay, so what's the worst that happens? I go on his show. I don't break the record. Well, I'm the same as I was. I go on the show. I break the record. Now I have a world record. So I said, okay. He said they said that they would have a limo come to my house. I had 5 hours. So I called up Guinness. I said, what do you have to do to break the record? They said something from Shakespeare, the Bible. Me and Shakespeare never got along. I had a psalm from the Bible that I knew. So I had 5 hours at home to practice doing the 91st Psalm over and over and over again. You know, like, he didn't all take place at the most touchdowns. I'm just like over and over and over. Went on a show, broke the record at that time doing 585 words a minute. And then since then, I rebroke it, doing 603.22 words a minute, which is 11 words a second. That's how I got into the Guinness Book.
That is incredible. And I noticed too, how have you been able to use this as a stand-up comedian in New York? I know that people just love you. You have such a good audience out there all over the world.
Oh, thank you. Well, as a stand, you know, the funny thing is, I mean, when and I'm not saying that because I'm a stand-up comic. I'm just saying is that I try to incorporate and keep everything, you know, tie everything in together. And as a stand-up comic, you know, when, you know, there's, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 stand-up comics in the United States. I mean, there's not that many. And I was like, well, that is one way that I could make it stand out, because a lot, at the end of the day, everything that you do in a way has to do with how you stand out. You could be the best person, but you got to do stuff that makes you stand out. And so I was like, Fran Capo is a stand-up comic, so when they would introduce me on stage, I would start my show by telling them, you know, that I was a stand-up you know, that I was in a Guinness Book, and I would win fights with my husband. For example, if I got into a fight, he would say, "Was I in it?" I was like, "Not only were you in it, it's over, you lost." And so I would just incorporate right at the top that I was the fast talker to distinguish myself from other people, and then I would, you know, use it in the act. But honestly, Lisa, since then, I've used it in like the craziest places, because I get hired by a lot of corporations to do, you know, to do motivational speaking and to do the comedy and stuff. But what I could tell them is I can combine the motivational speaking with the stand-up comedy with the fast talking. So if they want me to go in there and be an imposter, for example, and do my fast talking, I could say to them, well, give me your message points. Then they would tell me what it is. I would add humor to it. So now I'm not just fast talking, I'm adding humor to it, and I'm giving them motivation at the same time, which is, you know, like when you and I worked together, when I came to your school, you told me the topics that were needed, and I just incorporated it using all of those three elements: the fast talking, the stand up, and the motivation.
Yes. And the thing that I think was so exciting, and one of the things that we want to get across to educators today, is the importance of exposing our staff members and our students to exciting things, giving them experiences. And that was one of the things that attracted me to you early on. You had written a book about adventure and talked about what you had done with your son Spencer. And I wanted to do that for my schools. I knew I had kids that were in urban setting, and they had very limited exposure to anything other than what was on their block. And pretty much I had teachers that came from the same background. So when I found you by finding out about the world's fastest talker, and I love the Bible, and you had done Psalm 91. And
Which
I
is the
saw
protection psalm. Yes.
Yes. And I saw that, and I said, I've got to have her come. And so I really appreciated you coming on your busy schedule like that and really prioritizing. But would you share a little bit about what you found over, you know, your life experience with your son, with working with other people, and the importance of exposing people to new things and trying new things, and the value of experiential life things, just getting out of the box?
Sure. Well, you know, first of all, I'm lucky that I had my mom and dad were regular, you know, working class, you know, people. My dad was a truck driver. My mom, you know, an assistant teacher. But when she had me initially, she was, you know, a stay-at-home mom. But I was lucky in that my mom taught me that nothing is impossible, and my dad taught me to always look for the humor in life. So if I was doing something, I would, you know, and if it worked, I would use it and make it part of the motivational speaking. If it didn't work, it became part of the stand-up comedy. But because I had in my head the thing that my mother always said to me of nothing is impossible, whenever I saw something, and I raised Spencer that same way, because from the day he was born and came home, and obviously he couldn't read unless he's like a miracle child or something, but he couldn't read. And, you know, the day he's born, on his crib, I have three things. God guides me always. I am a winner, and nothing is impossible. Because there's so much negativity that goes on, like, oh, I want to do this. Oh, you can't do that. You don't have enough money. Oh, I want to do. Oh, you can't do that. You're too big. You're too tall. You're too small. You're too whatever. And I was always like, no, nothing's impossible. If somebody else could do it, I could do it. So I used to instill that in Spencer. So, but a lot of times I have a habit of whenever I see something, I'm like a kid. I want to do it right away. It's so if I hear that the manatees are going to become extinct, for example, you know, obviously it's not happening tomorrow, but in my head, I'm like, that's it. I'm going to take my son. We're going to go to Crystal River and we're going to go see the manatees. And then I will find a way, you know, in that instance, actually, which was actually kind of funny, was I had found out about it on a Wednesday, and I said, all right, well, I'm not taking him out of school because we had this thing about having perfect attendance. And so I said, okay, Spencer, Friday night, we're going to go to Florida. We're going to drive down. We're going to drive down to Florida, and we're going to, you know, go to school, but we're going to fly back, you know, so whatever. Anyway, we get down there. I drive to Florida. I arranged to go swimming with the manatees. And my son, you know, at this point in time, he's in third grade. It's not like, you know, he's not a scuba diver yet or anything. So we get down there, and all these animals have a habit of, you know, at the crack of dawn, you know, you got to get up to see them. I'm like, are there any animals that sleep late? Do we always have to, you know, you have to get up at the crack of dawn to see these things? So there we go, crack of dawn. We're in Crystal River, Florida, and we're, you know, the mist is over the water, and we're heading out there. And then they say, okay, this is where you're going to get into the water. And Spencer goes in the water first, and I go in the water. And he's like, Mommy, I feel something. I'm like, I'm sure it's a manatee. I mean, we're in Florida. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, could be a crocodile. But I'm like, I'm sure it's a manatee. So then I had never seen a manatee up close. I had only, you know, you see pictures of it. This thing was huge. It was like a small bus. So we, you know, take our scuba diving masks, even though we were just snorkeling the time, look down, this thing's going by and by and by and by. So the lady says, you're not allowed to touch them. We have to go in the section where the sanctuary is. So we go in the section, and as we're going in, there's this big sign that is like those red circles with a cross through it, and it's got a picture of an alligator with the circle and the cross. So I say to the lady, well, what's that? She goes, oh, that's so the alligators know not to go there. I'm like, what? I go, what do you mean? Like the alligator reads that sign? She goes, I said, what if we get like a dyslexic alligator who thinks that means come on, buffet? And she's like, no, don't worry. The alligators know not to go. I go, what do you mean the alligators know not to go? There's not a fence. Anyway, we go there. We do the swimming with the manatees, have this great experience. Spencer goes back to school. He's right on time on Monday. Science teacher asks a question, and she said, has anybody ever felt moss? My son raises his hand. I felt moss on the back of a manatee. I get a call. Mrs. Capo, she said, I appreciate that your son has a vivid imagination, but I don't appreciate that he disrupts the classroom. I said, well, what happened? So I asked everybody if they saw moss, if they felt moss. Your son said he felt it on the back of a manatee. I said, well, actually he did. And so she said, well, really? And when was this? I said, this weekend. And then I said, if you want, I could give you pictures, you know, to bring into the classroom. She goes, no, it's not in our, it's not in my schedule. You know, it's not in the approved. I said, well, that way other people could see it. And she goes, Miss Capo, did you ever think that if you have these pictures and you show them to the kids, that there could be some kids who maybe can't afford, you know, to go running out over the weekend and seeing manatees, And, and that would be bad. And I said, well, did you ever think that maybe they didn't know that there were such things that you could go pet a manatee? And now the kids will be inspired to make money and go out there and do that because now they've been open to something in the world. She goes, well, I don't think you should, be going all around, the world doing these crazy things with your son because he's going to find school boring. I said, well, then I think you better become a better teacher because I'm not going to stop doing that. The key is you want to expose your kid and other kids and people and parents and everybody to as many experiences in life as possible. God gave us a life to live to the fullest. And when I die, I want to be able to go up there and say to him, man, I used up everything you gave me. And that is the way that I teach my son. And that is the way when I speak to people, when I'm at corporations and everything, I'm always saying to people, what are you waiting for? Why are you waiting to take that piano lesson? Why are you waiting to do that trip? Well, because I don't have this. No, there's not only one way to do something. It's not just, if you don't have the money, barter. What if you know how to do websites and that person owns a travel agency? So you say, hey, you give me that trip for free and I'll build you a website. Now there's no money exchange. Now you bartered, you figure out a way to do that. Or what if each kid in the classroom, has a different skill or something that they do, and each one can introduce the other one to it, and then someone discovers something that they never even knew they liked because they didn't even know, geology existed or whatever. So my whole thing is taking any of these experiences and teaching people how to go out, find the experiences, live life to the fullest, and also then take that same motivation and passion and put it into your students, into your employees, into anybody you come into touch with.
Yes, and you do so many different things. You're an author also. There's not one of your books that I have not enjoyed. I love every single one of them. They all have a different focus, but I noticed too that you find ways to tie in everything that you do to your work. Tell me about that and what happened what were you doing up on Mount Kilimanjaro there? What was going on?
Well, you see, now that's funny. You're right. I do find ways to tie everything in because when I get an idea in my head, I'm like, wow, I could go do the experience. I could talk about it on stage and I could write about it for an article. Then I could incorporate it into a book. But mainly I do it because I love it. So with Kilimanjaro, what happened was I was writing a book and on adrenaline adventures. And it was because I wrote a couple of different articles, like an article on sharks, an article on different things for different magazines. And people kept saying, hey, where did you go again to go to Grand Canyon rafting? Where did you go again to, walk on hot coals? And I said, oh, it'd just be easier if I stuck this all in one book. So as I was putting it into a book, there was this one adventure that I had done, and I wanted to make sure that these organizations that I was saying that I did it with still existed. So I called up this one guy and I said, hey, I just want to find out if you guys are still doing the rock climbing, blah, blah, blah. He goes, oh, yeah. Not only do we do rock climbing, we do mountain climbing. I said, oh, and he goes, did you ever think of mountain climbing? I said, well, no, not really. I'm writing about the rock climbing right now. And then he goes, well, we climb, and whatever mountain he named, quite honestly, I had never heard of. And I said, okay, no offense, but if I'm going to climb a mountain, I'm not climbing like Mount Bob. I have to climb a mountain that I've heard of, So then he goes, well, what about Kilimanjaro? And I went, well, I've heard of that one. And then he goes, well, do you ever think of climbing Kilimanjaro? I said, well, no, I was actually just calling you about rock climbing. And so then he put the idea in my head. So I get off the phone with the guy and I start researching and I find out that an 83-year-old woman climbed Kilimanjaro. And I'm like, if an 83-year-old woman could do it, I could do it. Of course, I didn't realize she was in a wheelchair and got airlifted up there. But, I was like, okay. And so then I was like, all right. So I run into the room because now I'm all excited that I'm, going to do this. I go, Spencer, we're going to climb Kilimanjaro. And he's like, I don't even like to walk. I'm like, no, you're missing a point. The glaciers are going to melt by the year 2015. At that time, it was 2008. So he's like, well, he's like, Mom, we've got time. I'm like, that's not the point. The point is you want to do it now, grab it now, live in the present, blah, blah, blah. So now my poor son, he's like, all right, Mom, because he knows once I get an idea in my head, that's it. I'm finding a way to climb Kilimanjaro. So now I'm going, well, I can't just climb Kilimanjaro. I mean, I have to do something while I'm there. So I figured, why not do a book signing at the top of Kilimanjaro? So I had to figure out a way that I was going to bring my books up there. So we got the Maasai warriors who were bringing us up anyway. And I decided, now the funny thing is there's 7 different zones when you climb Kilimanjaro. And we climbed on the side like this, east side and a western side. So I asked the guy, hey, what side are we climbing on? He goes, oh, the western side. I said, why are we doing that side? And he goes, oh, that's where the athletes climb, and marathon runners. I go, all right, well, I'm not a marathon runner, so why are we doing the western side? He goes, oh, because you're an adventurer, and you don't want to see anybody. And when you go on the eastern side, it's called the Coca-Cola Trail, and you get to see all the people in front of you climbing it. If we go on the western side, nobody's there. I go, so like if we die or something, nobody's going to see us fall off the mountain. Is that what you're telling me? And he's like, no, you'll love it. You'll love it. I'm like, all right. So literally the entire 7 days, we did not, outside of our group, which consisted of only 4 people, me, Spencer, the vice president of Stride Right Shoes, and his daughter. And that was it, and the Maasai people who were taking us up there. And we're climbing, and poor Spence, every day he's going, Mom, the mountain's not getting any closer. And I was looking at it too, and I was like, no, keep walking. We've been walking for 8 hours. It's got to be getting closer. On the night that we had a summit, it was minus 45 degrees, minus 15 degrees, 45 mile an hour winds. And we're climbing this mountain at midnight, and Spencer's going, we're going to die. I'm like, we're not going to die. And he's going, we're going to die. I'm like, we're not going to die. And then I'm thinking, we're going to die. What was I thinking? We're going to die. And so anyway, we get to the top of the mountain. There at the top, there were other people that were coming up from the eastern side. And so when people were there, I was like, what are you doing? They're like, well, we climbed the mountain. I said, well, why don't you buy a book? And they were like, what? I go, what else are you going to do up here? You're going to stay on the top of the mountain, buy a book. So we had dragged the books up there. So there's a picture at my website, francapo.com, of me standing on the top of Kilimanjaro, sitting in a chair, which I believe is the picture you have, standing, sitting in the chair with everybody online buying my book.
That's exactly that's exactly what everybody's seeing right now, Fran. That's so incredible. And then
it was so funny seeing their expression. They're up there, and then I'm like, buy a book. What else are you gonna do?
I wonder what they thought about carrying. When you're walking around and having to cart everything, all your belongings together. Wonder if they were thinking, "Oh, I've got something to read," or if they were thinking, oh my goodness, I've got another thing to carry.
It's true, but what I did for them, actually, here's the thing, is I had only a few books up there, and what I did was they actually paid me at the top of the mountain, and I told them I would leave the books at the bottom so they didn't have an extra thing to carry.
That's good. Oh my goodness.
I didn't have any excuses of why they couldn't shell out that and buy the book.
Yeah, exactly. That was so neat. And I loved that. And, the thing about this particular book is it's got exact examples of everything you have done. It's not just ideas. These are the adrenaline adventures are adventures you actually have experienced. And so if you're one of the people listening, if you're one of the listeners, just think about, have a hard time being creative with types of experiences and exposing yourself and your family and your friends and your employees. If you happen to be a business owner, get this book, because if you follow this right here is going to be something that will really create memorable experiences. I mean, there's so many different ones. Fran's told you 2 of them so far, but there's so many different ones in this book, and very creative. And I'm sure Spencer has got a very well-rounded education.
Well, the funny thing is, like, even then, I mean, I wrote that book, and then since I've written the book, I also write for a website called Traveling Mom. So like, for example, literally 2 days ago, I was zip lining over Niagara Falls. So I'll be writing about that. Back in July, just a couple of months ago, I was going all around Poland, climbing, going to the holy mountain of Grabanka, going to where the Wolf's Lair, where they tried to suitcase bomb Hitler, going to Upside Down House, getting our feet in the Baltic Sea. We did 1,500 miles in 5 days by car. And we were just all over Poland. My thing is, you have a whole world, explore it.
Yes.
And the adventures in the book not only tell you what adventures to try, where to try it, the level of difficulty, what gear you need, but I also tell, in a humorous way, the story of me doing my adventure. And hey, here's where you could go to do it. This is the gear you need. This is how much you need to weigh. Because some have weight limits, like zip lining, you can't be over 250 pounds, for example, things like that. So it tells people, but then it also gives you other ideas. Hot air ballooning. You don't have to only go to that place. There's hot air ballooning all around the whole United States. The zip lining, again, not only, in Niagara Falls, all around the United States. There's zip lining in Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. Not Mammoth Cave, in a mega cavern in Kentucky. And you zip line in the dark. So, I mean, it's just that, I love doing that stuff. I love exposing people to things they don't even know about.
Yes. And I think, you said it, God's given us life and he wants to have us to have abundant life, but we need to be the ones to pursue that. And so that's one of the things that I've learned most from you and your life, watching your life. And over the years, you've been doing so many different things and you've contributed so much to those of us who get involved in the daily grind of life and kind of forget about the personal growth elements and what we need to be doing and how to just enjoy our daily life. And one of the things that you've contributed to the world, Fran, is how to find humor in life. And a lot of times educators have a hard time finding humor because they forget the joy that children bring, the joy that students bring. And there's so many responsibilities on them. And then those of us who have different businesses that we're running, sometimes we forget that this is an opportunity to live our dreams. And so we forget that humor is going to help us refocus and get the most out of it. Tell us a little bit about some of those things, what you talk about in your book about the humor approach and some of those applications for us in our everyday lives.
Well, yeah, you're right, because the thing is, everything in life has to do with your approach to it, your attitude to it. Like, you could sit in a classroom and look at the kids and go, oh, God, I got to deal with these kids again. Or you could actually say, you know what, that was a funny thing that kid said. So you could look at things either way. But remember, they're also looking at you as a teacher, and they're taking cues, because if, let's say my son once told me that one of his favorite teachers was his history teacher. A lot of times, let's say he was talking about the Boston Tea Party or whatever, pirates, the teacher would literally come in dressed as a pirate. Or the teacher would get up there and bring and he would make the story come to life. Everybody likes to be entertained. And it makes it fun for you, too, if you're not doing it the same way every day. If you're going, all right, today we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. But if you really get into it and think about the story aspect of it, because really, when you think about it, anything in history is a story. You're just basically telling somebody's story of how they did something. So you could do it by making people memorize dates and just saying it, or you could say, now imagine. There you are on the morning. You don't think anything's going to happen. And all of a sudden you hear a horse running through town and some guy's yelling, the redcoats are coming. First you're thinking, well, who are they? And you just make it come to life. You tell it like a story, as if it's a movie unfolding. And so, but when you add humor is another aspect of dramatizing something, then it's memorable. Because when you think about anything that happens, for example, during the Super Bowl, the commercials that everybody remembers are the commercials with humor. That's what people talk about the next day. And that in advertising dollars is worth millions. Well, if you translate that same thing to in a classroom, that can make the difference between your students loving to learn and then just learning just to get a grade. And one way it stays for, just the time of the test. The other way it stays for a lifetime. And so in the humor approach, I actually broke it down into, several ways, because people sometimes, I'm not comfortable telling a joke. So I break it down into talking about just like kind of the basics, like, well, what is funny? Know your audience. You're going to say a joke a different way for a kid than you are going to say it for an adult. What are the benefits of humor? Actually, during time of crisis, like when you think now what's going on, in Texas with the hurricane and the flooding. Well, there was a story during Katrina that this guy lost his house. And, you think, of course, this is horrible. Everybody lost all their possessions. And it was a tornado, actually, or I don't remember exactly what natural disaster was. But they left a sign outside of where their house used to be that said, "Gone with the wind." If you can do that when your house has just been ripped apart, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So even at those moments, this person found the humor to write "Gone with the Wind" in front of where its house used to stand. And so people always say, but how could you joke about that? And the thing is, my dad always told me, well, maybe at the moment it might not seem funny, but at some point in life it will seem. So instead of waiting to laugh, try to find the humor in it now, which is what we did when, my dad had cancer. He made me go out and buy a chia pet to see his hair would grow back faster, and he would cut the chia pet's hair so he could win. So people say, oh, come on, you can't joke about anything. And I'm like, well, actually you can. It's, you're not making fun of it, which is the key. What you're doing is you're learning how to take a situation and turn it so you can deal with it. Yeah. And in the book, which one are you laughing at? Gone with the Wind?
I'm laughing about your dad. That's so funny.
Oh, yeah, my dad.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. My dad had cancer too, and it just kind of reminds me, yeah, that's true. You do have to find the humor, but I could just picture that right. Oh, goodness.
Well, I mean, I can tell you a situation that, keeping it clean because of, the nature of your show, but just giving you the gist of it was, my dad was, towards the end, he had the cancer. And he, at one point, was in the bathroom. It's 4:00 in the morning, and I heard him crying in the bathroom. And I was like, Daddy, let me in. And he was like, no, I don't want you to come in. I'm like, Dad. And I could tell by where his voice was that he wasn't standing, like he was on the floor. And I was like, are you all right? And so I went in, and he had fallen on the floor. And unfortunately, I don't know how he managed to do this. He went to the bathroom, and literally it was all over the place, on the ceiling, on the floor. So I put him in the tub, and he's like, I never expected you to see me like this. I go, Dad, not for nothing. I didn't expect this either. Clean him up and everything. And I put him back outside in the living room where his bed and everything, the hospital bed and everything was set up. And so it's 4:00 in the morning, and now I'm in the bathroom cleaning this up, and I'm crying because I'm like, oh my God, this is disgusting, gross, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going, okay, Capo, you say that anything can be funny. What is funny about this situation? And I'm over there going, nothing's funny about this situation. I'm like, oh yeah, then don't tell people that anything can be funny if you can't find the funny. Like in my head, I'm thinking this. And then all of a sudden the thought hit me with the expression, when the blank hits the fan. And I just said, oh my God. So then I went out, and after I cleaned everything up, I went, Dad, you know the expression when the crap hits the fan? He goes, yeah. I go, we just experienced it. And we both laughed until we cried and laughed.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's what I mean. You can find it in anything. And that's always, that's what Bob Hope did. And I talk about this in my book as well. Bob Hope would go and visit soldiers, you know, whose legs had gotten blown up, arms had got, and he would joke with them. Listen, you know, I know you wanted to get home, but is this the way you wanted to do it? You know, I mean, or whatever, you know what, whatever stuff. And the thing is, people would say, oh no, you can't do that. Even when you think about, I can't remember the doctor's name right now, but Robin Williams portrayed that Dr. Patch, or was
Patch
it Patch
Adams.
Adams?
Yeah, Patch Adams.
Right? And he went into the hospitals and was making people laugh, people who were terminally ill.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine has an organization called Comedy Cures, and it's all about going in and giving the patients and their caretakers humor. You can use humor in business, with kids. And what I did was, in this book, I literally outlined things as simple as, you know, how to use eye contact, palm gestures, your body language when you're talking, never to stand behind a podium when you give a speech, because that serves as a barrier between you and the other person. When you think of the speakers that are very popular, like the Tony Robbins and people like that, you never see them standing behind a podium. They're out there with their whole body open, you know, saying, like, you know, exposing themselves, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, not exposing themselves, obviously, that'd be a whole other career, but you know what I mean? Just right out there. And I talk about where you put the emphasis in the punch, how to be animated, how to wait for the laugh, how to, if you don't find that joke telling is your thing, how to find other things, you know, bringing a cartoon in of the day. Like, for example, if you even think of Joel Osteen, when he does his, you know, stuff in church and these sermons, he starts it with a joke.
Yeah.
So what if he came into the classroom and you decided, hey, I'm going to bring in a funny cartoon, or I'm going to bring in a funny, you know, clip, or I'm going to say, you know, or each kid, you know, each day you give the kids an assignment. On your way to school, you have to look for something funny that happens on the way to school. You make people become more aware of the good in the world. And that sets a different tone for the classroom. If each kid has an assignment for homework, besides what they do, is you have to look for one happy thing. You have to look for one funny animal, you know, thing, or one, you know, or something. Then people learn to look for that. And you're teaching them a lifetime skill. Plus, you're making your classroom, or you're making your situation of where you work, even if it's just with fellow teachers, you're making it fun, not like, oh, here we are again, it's a Monday. You know, you're making it fun.
Yes. Well, one of the things we're going to be doing in the future, those of you who are part of Educator Circle, if you are an educator in any type of school system, whether it's a public school, a private school, parochial, charter, homeschool, we've got a little information to share. You're the first to hear about this today on Educator Nation podcast, that there's going to be something exciting in the new year coming, where we're going to have a series for you of how to bring love, laughter, and light into your classroom. And we're going to be working with a book that Fran wrote called Hopeville, and some of the other principles that you've heard on the line today. We're going to be working about that, not just talking with you about these things, but helping you to find ways to implement this. And so we're looking forward to it. And what closing thoughts do you have on these things, Fran, to share with everybody on what we're going to be doing together?
Well, a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing is based on the book that I wrote, Hope for the City of Light, which is actually a book that came to me different than all the other books. Because the other books I consciously said, hey, I'm going to write a book called The Humor Approach and tell people how to go about and, you know, add humor to their life. But Hope for the City of Light, I was literally in the middle of working on another book at 4 o'clock in the morning. I hear a voice say to me, Fran, get up. You got to write this book. And I'm like, okay, this is like the weirdest dream. And so I get up, don't see anything, say, oh, that was weird, go back to sleep. I hear the voice again going, get up, you have to write this book. So I turn on the light, and I'm like, all right, I hear a voice. I don't know whether I'm dreaming. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm in the middle of another book, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't feel like writing. And they said, write this title down. So I was told to write down the title of Hopeville, the City of Light. And it said, it has a message that will change the world. And so I was like, all right. So I write down the thing. Next morning, I say, oh, that's it. I'm not writing anymore. I go back to sleep. Next morning, I get up. I got to take my kids to school, my mom to work. I have to get my car fixed. I go. I said, hey, I'm working on a book. Can I I was actually working on the Adrenaline Inventions book at the time. I said, do you have a place I can put my laptop? He said, sure. Never had writer's block in my life. I've written 19 books, never writer's block. So there I am in the back, about to work on the next chapter, which I believe is the shark chapter. And I go to type, my hands physically won't move. And I'm like, okay, this is really weird. I go to type again, can't type. I'm like, I cannot sit here for 3 hours and not get anything accomplished. So I don't know what the problem is. So I said, what was that dream I had, or that name, or the whatever? And I take out of my pocket the little piece of paper I had scribbled on. And I said, all right, let me try this. So I went to type in the computer, Hopeville, the City of Light. And all of a sudden, that's the only thing I remember typing. For the next 3 hours, the book poured out of me. I remember writing the words, the end, and I remember the guy going, Fran, your car's ready. That was very weird. I said, what? He goes, you didn't look like you moved. You didn't breathe. You didn't go to the bathroom. You didn't take water. He goes, you look like a zombie. I said, I think I wrote a book. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I honestly cannot tell you one word that's on that page. And so he goes, all right. And so I left the book, went back to writing Adrenaline Adventures. 2 weeks later, I decided I should probably look at what I wrote. So I look at it, and it's a story about 4 people, a little boy that gets bullied in school, a woman, a widow who's holding down 3 jobs, a successful businessman who gave up having love and a family just to build a business, and an old man who feels he's got a lot of knowledge, but nobody wants to listen to him because he's too old. The 4 of them say a prayer at night about like how they feel kind of lost and they don't know what to do, and an angel of light appears to them and basically tells them, if you just change this one little shift in your life, not only will you change your life, you'll help influence other people to do it. Oh, I can't, I'm just a little boy, or I'm just a mother, or I'm just it. Anyway, they decide to follow the angel's guidance, and they wind up going through a set of challenges where all of them get intermingled together. And they literally wind up changing the town because through this hope. So now I write this book, I get it out there, and I'm like, okay, well, I wrote the book, and then I started thinking, well, I guess I should do something with the book. I literally tell one friend, all right, listen, I'm getting this book out there, I go do it. And in one day, I went to Staples, made up 50 copies, all 50 copies sell. So I was like, all right, I'll make up another 50 copies, another 50 copies sell. So then I'm like, okay, good. I got the book out there, and I leave it. Then it wasn't until a couple of years ago, I started thinking, wow, I never really did anything with that book. And if it was somebody giving me a signal that I was supposed to get out of, I should do it. I put it as an ebook. I put it out, and on the day I send it out, it hits number 11 on Amazon. And I was like, wow. So then I started getting people calling and telling me, this book is, I was a widower, and this book really changed my life. Can you write it as a regular book? And I was like, well, I'm leaving for Korea. I'm going to perform for the military, blah, blah. And she's like, please, please. I have a whole group of women that the benefit from the book. So I made it into a regular book. And then the book now, since then, like Miller Coors, Pfizer, all these different companies have bought the book to share with their employees, family members, and different people about the lessons in Hopeville. Now, I didn't want to change anything of the story, so what I did was I pulled out the 44 lessons of Hopeville, which are in the back of the book. And basically, those lessons were through the story of the 44 secrets of life and how to live them. And so part of the thing that Lisa, that you and I are going to work on, and the program that we're going to roll out, is talking in detail about the 44 secrets to happiness.
Yes. Yes, and we want to make sure that this is going to be for all ages, but we're going to give it to the educators so that this is something they can work on with their kids throughout the year. they can work on the 44 things. And what this is going to do, everybody, this would be for instructional leaders for your buildings, but teachers for your classrooms. What this is going to do is this is going to help you establish a culture like no other that involves love in the environment, that involves humor, and that involves light. And we're going to make sure that this is like nothing else that you've ever seen. So we're just be expecting that and looking forward to it, because we're going to work hard on this. And Fran has so much love for teachers. She's worked with so many different environments in every type of industry in every area, and not just the entertainment industry, but every single industry. And she loves educators. And so we're going to work really hard on this and bring you something that you can use that will really make a difference in your personal life and in the life of whatever you do for your work. So,
and on that note, also just to clarify, I've done educating 4 kids at the age from kindergarten. I've been asked to speak to kindergartners all the way up to college graduates, doing the keynotes for them at different colleges. So it can be broken down into all different. It's very simple. The lessons are very simple, but they're very powerful.
yes.
Someone described the book to me as, it's not a book, it's a way of life. And basically, it's going to be teaching those ways of life. And like I said, people from the educators to CEOs of major corporations are using the book.
Yes. And I want everybody to know that if you want to know more about Fran, if you want to be able to find out how you can get her as a motivational speaker or find out about her books or anything that she's doing, follow her on her website, francapo.com. And also follow us on Educator Nation. You'll see this podcast and you'll see us and what we're going to be doing. And thank you all for listening today. We appreciate everybody and love everybody. And just remember, it's the educator that makes the difference.